It started like any other Thursday. I arrived at the office around 8:30 a.m., a bit earlier than usual, hoping to impress my boss. I'd only been working at Dalton and Associates for 3 months, but I'd already learned that punctuality, attention to detail, and discretion were key if I wanted to stand out. My boss, Rebecca Hayes, was the kind of woman who turned heads without trying. She was elegant, powerful, and demanding in a way that inspired equal parts admiration and fear. At 42, she was the youngest partner the firm had ever promoted, and no one doubted she'd earned every ounce of that title. Rebecca wasn't the type to engage in small talk or share personal stories. She kept her professional life sharp and clean, just like her perfectly tailored suits. I, on the other hand, was still figuring things out. I was 26, fresh out of grad school with a marketing degree, and still adjusting to life in the corporate world. I didn't expect to be noticed much, but something changed after a meeting last week. I presented an idea for a social media campaign that not only got her attention, it got the client to sign on for an extended contract. Since then, she had started calling on me more frequently. That morning, as I settled into my desk, I noticed Rebecca glance over at me from her corner office. Her look was unreadable as always, but something about it made me straighten my posture and get back to work. Around 10 a.m., she sent me a brief email. "Ethan, I'd like you to stay a bit after work today. We need to go over the Peterson account. Important. No explanation. No pleasantries. Just straight to the point." I replied with a quick, "Of course. Happy to," and didn't think much of it until the clock hit 5 p.m. and most of the office began clearing out. By 5:30, it was only the cleaning crew, a couple of IT guys in the server room, and me still at my desk. Rebecca hadn't said anything further all day. I debated whether to knock on her office door or wait for her to call me. Just as I stood up, she stepped out of her office holding a thick folder. "Ethan, let's go over this in the conference room," she said, not waiting for a response. I followed her in, my palms suddenly sweating for no good reason. The conference room was dimly lit, the blinds drawn, and the table scattered with papers. Rebecca sat at the head of the table and motioned for me to sit beside her, not across from her as usual. "I've been watching your work," she said, flipping open the folder. "You're sharp." The Peterson presentation was one of the best pitches I've seen from a junior associate in a long time. I smiled awkwardly, unsure how to respond. "Thank you. That means a lot." She nodded, her gaze lingering a moment longer than usual. "You have potential, Ethan. More than I think you realize." For the next 30 minutes, we went over the numbers, potential strategies, and client feedback. But slowly, the conversation began to drift from work to more personal topics. She asked me about my career goals, where I saw myself in 5 years, and if I had any mentorship within the firm. I told her I didn't, that I was mostly trying to learn through observation. "That's smart," she said. "But some things you can't just learn by watching." Her voice had taken on a softer tone, and her posture relaxed. I noticed her shoes were off under the table, and that she was sipping from a cup of tea she'd brought in. It felt less like a meeting and more like something else. I wasn't sure what. "Do you ever feel like you're out of place here?" she asked suddenly. I hesitated before answering. "Sometimes. Everyone here seems so sure of themselves. I guess I'm still figuring out where I fit." Rebecca nodded knowingly. I know that feeling well. When I started, I was the only woman in a room full of men twice my age. I had to be smarter, faster, tougher. She paused. "Sometimes, even now, I feel like I have to prove myself all over again." I was surprised by her vulnerability, and for the first time, she felt less like a boss and more like a person. "You don't have to prove anything," I said without thinking. "You've already done that 100 times over." Her eyes met mine, and a long silence followed. Then she said, "You're a good man, Ethan. Don't let this place change you." She stood and began gathering the papers, but instead of leaving, she walked toward the window and looked out at the city lights. Most people think success looks like this: an office, power, control. But it gets lonely up here. I didn't know what to say, so I just stood quietly. Then she turned to me and said something I'll never forget. Sometimes I stay late just so I don't have to go home. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I took a step closer, unsure of where this was heading. Rebecca, are you okay? I asked. She laughed softly. That's the first time someone's asked me that in weeks. The moment was intense, but not inappropriate. There was no tension that felt forced or wrong, only a sense of two people finding honesty in a space where it rarely existed. I told her that if she ever needed someone to talk to, I was around. I meant it, and she knew I did. Thank you, she said, placing a hand lightly on my shoulder. That means more than you know. After that, she walked me out of the conference room and told me to head home. We'll finish the rest tomorrow. Get some rest, Ethan. I left the office feeling like something had shifted, not just between us, but in me. For the first time, I saw Rebecca not as the perfect, untouchable boss, but as someone real, someone human. The next day, she acted as though nothing had happened. Back to her usual professional tone, strict and focused. But every now and then, I'd catch her looking at me across the office, and she'd smile. A real smile, not the polite kind. And I'd smile back. Whatever happened that night wasn't about romance or office politics. It was about connection. It was about seeing each other beyond titles and expectations. Weeks passed, and while our working relationship remained professional, there was a subtle understanding between us. She began involving me in more strategic projects and even suggested I attend a leadership seminar she was speaking at. You're going to lead something one day, she said, handing me the invitation. You might as well start preparing for it now. I took her advice, and with her quiet mentorship, I began to grow more confident in my role. Other department heads started noticing my input, and within 6 months, I was promoted to lead coordinator on a major client account. At the celebration party, Rebecca pulled me aside and said, I told you. Potential. I laughed. You saw it before I did. Sometimes, life surprises you in the least expected ways. I thought staying after work that night would just be a routine assignment. I never imagined it would lead to one of the most pivotal moments in my career. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. Because instead of making assumptions, we chose respect. Instead of crossing lines, we built trust. And that trust became the foundation of something far more valuable than a late-night office story. It became the start of a mentorship that changed my life. I still work at Dalton and Associates, now in a senior role. Rebecca eventually moved to a higher leadership position at the firm's New York office.